It's time for the frequency review for the PS2. Yes, this is the first PS2 game I've ever reviewed, and if it wasn't obvious, yes, this is the game that inspired my YouTube alias. What made this game so special I would dedicate a pseudonym to it? Let's find out. The year was 2002. I was 13 years old and headed over to my friend's house with the intention of playing Super Smash Bros. On the N64. Instead, they pull out a PS2 demo disc containing various games to try out. One of these was Frequency, and needless to say, I was completely hooked. I had never seen such a game before. Rhythm game? What's that? Almost every time I went back to their house after, I would request to play Frequency. Fast forward to 2005, I purchased a used PS2 and a copy of the full game. It was one of the best gaming decisions of my life. Think of Frequency as the great-grandfather of today's rhythm games. Without it, or its developer Harmonix, we probably wouldn't have Guitar Hero or Rock Band. After you choose a pre-existing or custom avatar for yourself, you'll only be able to play the first stage of songs. I have them all unlocked here, but if it's your first time playing, you'll need to beat each song to move on to the next stages. Also, some songs can only be played on normal and expert difficulties respectively. It's not like it is today where rhythm games allow you to play any song on any difficulty setting, and this is kind of a bummer. If you're not great at the game, you might not ever get to experience the final stage of songs, where arguably some of the best are located. When you begin a song, you'll travel through a tunnel, so to speak, which is broken up into cells represented on the right side of the screen, and the surrounding tunnel walls represent a specific track of the song. Depending on the song, the tracks can consist of drums, bass, guitar, synth, vocals, and effects. As you focus on a track, you'll need to play the notes represented by blue gems. Successfully playing all the track notes for 2 bars worth of the song will secure that track for the remainder of the time you're within the respective cell, which means that the track will play itself and you're able to move on to a different track. If you're able to complete all tracks in a cell, you'll be rewarded with freestyle tracks in the form of a disc scratch or added synth. Playing these will net you a minimum amount of points, but it's cool to create a mini remix during sections of the song. If you do well enough, the leading tunnel cells will open up, showcasing that most, if not all, the tracks will autoplay themselves, and all you get to do is play the freestyle tracks. I'm split on whether or not I like this. If you're trying to complete the song for the first time, then yes, it really helps achieve this, and it's also a nice bonus from the game basically saying you're doing really well, so you can just sit back and relax. However, if you're trying to get a higher score, it's quite difficult to achieve this, since playing the actual tracks nets more points than playing the freestyle tracks. Each track of every song only ever has 3 different gem locations, left, middle, and right. You'll need to line up the gems to your cursor and play them at the correct times using the L1, R1, and R2 shoulder buttons. You can also use the square, triangle, and circle face buttons too, but this is not recommended for high difficulty songs. Some of the gem combinations can get crazy, and using the shoulder buttons is basically needed in order to win. There are rare occasions where using a combination of the shoulder and face buttons can be advantageous though, such as a long straight line of fast-scrolling gems. There's not much room for error when playing the gems, as the game gives very little slack if you're not dead on with your timing. You could swear you hit the gems at the right time, but it wasn't close enough. If you're playing the game on a widescreen TV, it could be that there's some input latency, and if that's the case, you're out of luck since the game does not have any calibration options. It was developed in 2001, in a time where CRT monitors were the norm. The TV I use to capture this footage is a widescreen, but it's an older model that was manufactured in 2011, and it sure isn't a smart TV, but it works for the most part with very little to no latency input. A couple of power-ups are available to help you out. The auto catcher will let you essentially skip a track by activating it on command, and the multiplier will increase your score multiplier past its normal max limit. When you're first starting out, the multipliers are your best friend because you need to achieve a combined score within a stage of songs to unlock the rest. The list of songs available are honestly from groups and artists that I had never heard of before when I first played, and some are still quite obscure even to this day. That doesn't mean the songs aren't fun to play or good to listen to, but unless you're a music enthusiast, especially during the turn of the century, you probably won't recognize most of these songs or artists today. It's not surprising since music licensing is expensive, and for a proof of concept game like this, I can see why the list we got is the way it is. As I said though, it's not a bad thing, as some of these songs are still on my personal playlist today. A good handful of these songs are variations of EDM, but there's also rock, heavy metal, and hip-hop. The graphics and aesthetics fit the theme of the game. The one major problem I have though is that the gems aren't pronounced enough and can be difficult to see when the background has similar colors and patterns, and this can be especially true if the tunnel you play in has any curves to it. One cool feature is that you can play a track even if you're not dead center on it. Sometimes coming up on the preceding cell tunnel could be tricky, in that unless you've memorized all the patterns in available tracks, you can't tell which tracks would be live until it's too late and your consistency would break. However, if you're fast enough, you can press in the direction you need to access the track enough times and begin playing the gems, even if you're not yet centered. Pulling this off when the notes are essentially mirrored feels great and is so cool when it happens. One thing I didn't really like was that many of the songs, especially on higher difficulties, would start you out with one track, and in order to unlock the next tracks, you had to play the one you had perfectly. Not a huge demand, but the problem is, once the next tracks are unlocked, you won't know what the gem patterns will be, and you'll often have to sacrifice a minimum of 1 bar of gems. Now, restarting the song over and over will eventually help you memorize what is about to come up, but it would be better if there were 2 available tracks at the start of the song, and completing the first track would unlock the third, the second unlocks the fourth, and so on. There's an option to create an entire remixed song from any of the selections. The controls for doing so can take some getting used to, as you can't control the speed of the song while you're editing, but having this option is pretty cool nonetheless. In multiplayer mode, you and up to 3 others battle it out by using power-ups to mess each other up, and whoever has the highest score at the end wins. The first time playing this mode threw me off, since completing only 1 bar of gems will net you points, but it won't activate the track and you can just continue playing it over and over. While it plays a bit differently than the main campaign, it's still fun and is a nice addition. Frequency has such a special place in my gaming heart. It introduced me to one of my favorite gaming genres and broadened my scope of EDM songs, a win-win. While the difficulty can be brutal at times, the gems can get lost in the graphics, and keeping your streak alive during a song could be borderline unfair due to the player having to unlock tracks then immediately play them perfectly, it's still a fantastic rhythm game, and one that has brought me hundreds of hours of joy. This game gets a 4 out of 5 with the title of Awesome. Happy New Year!